أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We are in the last step of the tarbiyah process, wisdom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regarding wisdom, He says, يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا وَمَا يَذَّكَّرُ إِلَّا أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He grants wisdom to whom He wills, and whoever is granted wisdom is indeed granted great goodness, but none bears this in mind, pays attention to this, save those who have deep insight. So what does wisdom mean in Islam? Linguistically, the word hikmah, which is a noun, comes from the word hakama, which means he prevented or restrained him or it. The primary meaning of hikmah is that which prevents one from evil or ignorant behavior. And in the positive sense, it means having insight into that which is the best, most excellent. It implies moral discrimination and or the ability to judge between right and wrong. To understand the meaning of hikmah in Islam, we need to see if the Quran uses it, and if so, how does it define hikmah? Because once a word is defined in the Quran and in the hadith, in the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, then that becomes the default meaning for that word, and all other meanings for that word then become subject to it. And this is how Muslims should take anything when it comes to defining anything in life. The word hikmah appears about 20 times in the Quran and in several contexts. And its derivative, hakim, appears more than 85 times in the Quran. When it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, He refers to Himself in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Al-Hakim, the wise, in all its perfect sense, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, قَالُوا سُبْحَانَكَ لَا عِلْمَ لَنَا إِلَّا مَا عَلَّمْتَنَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَلِيمُ الْحَكِيمُ هو الذي يصوركم في الأرحام كيف يشاء لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم. And another place, Hakim al-Khabir. And another place, Wasi'un Hakima, and Tawwabun Hakim. So these are just some examples. Something to note though is Alimun Hakim and Azizun Hakim are the two most common combinations in the Quran that you will find in terms of how Hakim appears, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Himself as. Now, as you can imagine, there are volumes written on this attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we don't have the time to dive deep into it. Suffice it to say that for Muslims, the perfect representation of wisdom in all its perfection is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. He is Al-Hakim, and this is part of our iman, our belief. Therefore, from that it follows that whatever comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also full of wisdom. And this brings us to the next way hikmah and hakim are used in the Quran, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the Quran as a book of wisdom. As we can see here in these verses, Alif Lam Ra, Tilka Ayatul Kitabil Hakim. Another place in Surah Luqman, Tilka Ayatul Kitabil Hakim. Yasin wal Quran al Hakim, as many of us know this verse, this surah. Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He refers to Himself with reference to the Quran. He describes Himself as Al Hakim. Tanzilul Kitabi min Allahil Azizul Hakim. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who revealed that this book came down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mighty, the wise. So as you can see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only describes Himself as Al-Hakim, but He also describes the Quran as Kitabul Hakim or Kitab al-Hakim. And also, like the Quran, the nubuwah, the prophethood, and wahi, revelation, these are also referred to as hikmah, as we see in these verses with reference to other prophets and to wahi. Likewise, the sunnah is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the Quran, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ, that nothing is sent to the Prophet. He doesn't say anything to you, or share with you, except that it is inspired to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, even the sunnah, it is referred to as hikmah in the Quran. As you can see, many of these verses they are related to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, and according to the majority of the scholars, these ayats refer to the Quran, the Sunnah, the laws, the fiqh, and jurisprudence. In addition to this, there are two verses that I want to focus on more closely. The first one is in Surah Al-Baqarah, يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. We have recited this verse before. Referring to this verse, Ali bin Abi Talha, he reports that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he said, the wisdom that is mentioned here in this verse is knowledge of the Quran. For instance, having knowledge of which verses were abrogated, cancelled, nullified by other verses, what was made plain in the Quran, plain and clear, and what is not as plain and clear, the mutashabihat, what is allowed and what is not allowed in the Quran, and the knowledge of all the examples, the parables in the Quran that give us deep insight regarding this life and the akhirah. All of this is referred to as hikmah in this verse. Also, in relation to this verse, Imam Ahmad rahmatullah alayhi, he records that Ibn Masud radiallahu anh, he said that he heard the Prophet saying that there is no envy except in two things. One, a person to whom Allah has endowed, blessed with wealth, and that person spends it righteously. And the other one is a person to whom Allah has given hikmah, and that person uses it, judges by it, and teaches it to others. So having hikmah, which is referred as great goodness in this verse, is to have this deeper knowledge and understanding of the Quran. The second verse is in Surah An-Nahl, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he commands the Prophet to invite others with hikmah. Ud'u ila sabili rabbik bil hikmati wal mau'izatil hasana, and with good example. So here Ibn Jarir rahmatullah alayhi, he says that the word hikmah here refers to what was revealed to the Prophet from the Quran and the Sunnah. So likewise, we are commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to invite others to this deen using the Quran, using that same hikmah, which is the Quran and the Sunnah. So those are different ways hikmah is defined in the Quran. Another way to understand the meaning of a word is really to look at its opposite meaning. So the opposite of hikmah, wisdom, is safaha, stupidity and foolishness, and or jahl, ignorance, acting without knowledge. And we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used these opposites in the Quran many times whenever people have refused to act in accordance with revelation, with the hidayah that Allah has sent, the guidance, and also use these words also when people have questioned the revelation that came down to the Prophet ﷺ. So for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 67, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً. When Musa alayhi salam, when he said to Bani Israel that Allah orders you to sacrifice a calf or a cow, and they said, قَالُوا أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا, they said, do you mock us? Then in response, Musa alayhi salam, he says, قَالَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ أَنْ أَكُونَ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ, that I seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from people who are ignorant. So here you see how the Bani Israel, they were challenged, or they were questioning the order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and immediately they've been labeled as, for that response as being, foolish or ignorant. Another example is used to describe those who do not believe in the belief of Ibrahim alayhi salam. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says again in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَمَنْ يَرْغَبُ عَنْ مِلَّةِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِلَّا مَنْ سَفِهَ نَفْسَهُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the one who would want to abandon the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam unless they have lost their minds. So again here the word safaha is used. On a similar note, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسُ قَالُوا أَنُؤْمِنُ كَمَا آمَنَ السُّفَهَاءُ أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ السُّفَهَاءُ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. That when people are told to believe in what others have believed regarding what was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, they said, do you want us to believe as the foolish have believed? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls them foolish instead, for refusing to believe in the Prophet ﷺ and to what was revealed to him. So we see that wisdom is really tied to revelation, to wahi, and wise people are those who judge everything by it. In that case, we may ask, are Muslims not allowed to think? On the contrary, Islam encourages people to use their intellect. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reminds us again and again in the Quran, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Right? In the creation of the heavens and the earth and the turning of the night and the day are signs for people of understanding. So we are encouraged to use our intellect. However, there's a very fine rule when it comes to using one's intellect that many of us, especially those of us who are educated in the secular system, we seem to miss. And that rule is, in Islam, we can use our aql, we can use our intellect to think. But in matters of aqidah, in matters of belief, especially about al-ghaib, and rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever commands that He has sent down that are clear in the Quran, we cannot use our thinking to change them. We may use it, we may use our aql, our intellect, to try to understand them, but not to change them. So I cannot just dismiss an ayah, a verse from the Quran, just because it does not make sense to me, or it appears less relevant to me today. We need to realize that there is nothing wrong with the verse in the Quran. Instead, my own understanding is limited. And as history has proven again and again, what was not understood well in the Quran at one time, and people took it on faith at that time, became crystal clear later on. And in regards to this, there's an important attitude of the mind wise people have when it comes to the Quran. They submit to it without question. They can use their intellect later on, as I said, to understand it, but their first reaction, their first impulse is complete submission and acceptance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes this in the Quran in the incident where the Qibla was changed for Muslims from Jerusalem to Mecca. Those who question this change were called foolish by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is related to us again in Surah Al-Baqarah. سَيَقُولُ السُّفَهَاءُ مِنَ النَّاسِ مَا وَلَّاهُمْ عَنْ قِبْلَتِهِمْ الَّتِي كَانُوا عَلَيْهَا قُلْ لِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that the foolish amongst the people will say, what has turned them away from the direction of prayer which they used to observe before? Say to them, O Prophet ﷺ, to Allah belongs the east and the west. He guides whom He wills to the straight path. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this in the Quran in the incident where the Qibla was changed. This verse, by the way, was revealed in the month of Sha'ban. And since we are in the month of Sha'ban right now, it is a good time to reflect on it. Now, after this verse was revealed, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he started praying facing Mecca. In fact, the first prayer that he offered facing Mecca was Salatul Asr, the Asr prayer. After that, one of the companions, having prayed with the Prophet ﷺ, he arrived at one of the masajid that was on the outskirts of Medina. And the people over there were praying in congregation, in Jama'ah, facing Jerusalem, the old Qibla. So seeing this, he said in a very loud voice, I swear by Allah and I bear witness that I just came praying with the Prophet ﷺ and he was facing Mecca while praying. Now the people, they were in qiyam, they were standing in salah, in congregation, and when they heard this person, they immediately changed their direction from Jerusalem to Mecca while still in prayer. Now, this required them to literally turn from, as you can see here on this map, from facing north, northwest almost, to the south. Now, complete, really demonstrating complete obedience and acceptance. This was their first reaction. And that is the attitude of people who are wise, that they will accept what is in the Quran without question. And they may seek to better understand it with their intellect later on, but their first reaction is complete submission and acceptance of the rule that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed in the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us wise like the Sahaba, the companions. By the way, we can still visit this masjid. It is called Masjid Qiblatain, the masjid with the two Qiblas. It is located right now. That used to be the outskirts of Medina during the time of the Prophet, but now it is in the city of Medina, and that incident occurred in this masjid. We are encouraged by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to seek wisdom and to appropriate it wherever we come across it. As the Prophet ﷺ told us in a hadith narrated to us by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, that the wise saying is the lost property of the believer. So wherever he or she finds it, then he or she has a right to it. So this implies wisdom that is also attained through other means, through science, through research, through experience, as long as that wisdom does not contradict the wisdom in the Quran and Sunnah. So wisdom in Islam is to have the moral discretion that is based on the Quran and the Sunnah. That is why I have symbolized this last step with the green icon, WWMD, which stands for what would Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? Just to remind us to ask this question. Every time we are about to do something, ask, what would the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? Would he do it the same way that I'm thinking about doing? And act accordingly. So let's now go back to our personal growth plan for Ramadan and complete the last step with this understanding of wisdom in mind.